Oh, thank you so much, Ariel. And I also want to thank again the amazing team at Apex Art for making our exhibition possible. It was like a real treat to be in New York for the opening last week and to organize a tour and also an event in person there. But now we're super happy to be able to share our thoughts on the exhibitions and also give an insight into the artistic process with our audiences online. And yeah, we're super happy that this exhibition is also accessible online. And I also wanted to begin by speaking a bit about the idea behind the show and how we came to curate together. Tashima and I went to graduate school together, and yeah, for several years we both maintained an active interest in the role of plants in history and especially in connection to colonial history. And I myself worked on previous exhibition dealing with the role of, or the fascination with exotic plants by European audiences and traveling plants between indigenous contexts between Europe and Southeast Asia. And together with Tashima, we decided, because we share these interests, to put together a publication that is also called Flora Fantastic, Critical Contemporary Botanical Art, which is due out next year, and which is also looking from this global perspectives of Europe, United States, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, Latin America. And it's focusing on in both indigenous and imported plants as very active agents in colonial history, and looking at these very complex relationships between these different regions, focusing mostly on the 20th century, and also how those ramifications manifest today, and also how present-day artists engage with these histories and also connect to the pre-colonial times. So from this kind of publication, we decided to put together this exhibition. And from this kind of wealth and kind of, lush kind of examples of different artists that work with specific plants, we decided to focus on the role of plants as both medicine and poison. And I personally was inspired by this, word pharmacy, or which comes from a very old word, pharmakon, which means both poison and also medicine. And throughout the show, we're looking at how specific plants have been used in history by indigenous peoples, but also by kind of forces that were trying to kind of suppress dissent, and how they kind of have this dual nature, and kind of exploring that duality through the works of artists working today, bringing together artists from both from Europe and the Americas in dialogue together. So now I'll let Tashima introduce further the show and some of the artists.
Very good. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's online curatorial tour. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us to hear more about the show. I also want to extend my gratitude to Apex Art for working with us on this exhibition. It has been a wonderful experience, I have to say. And I'm so happy also to have the privilege and honor to working with Corina, who's been so busy coming off the Venice Biennale and show after show after show. She's a superstar. So I'm so happy that I got a chance to work with her on this exhibition and the book project, like she mentioned. Please look out for that next year. It's an edited volume, and we do have some wonderful guest writers joining us on that project. And so some of the things you're going to see today will be also in this publication. But if you are in New York and you stop by the gallery, you can get this lovely brochure that also has some images from the show as well. So make sure you pick up a lovely brochure when you go by the gallery. And again, the show is up till December 23rd. I just kind of want to restate a few things and then we'll jump into looking at some of the show. We're really thinking about plants as agents historically and in a contemporary moment. The exhibition actually came together in a very organic way and is multisensory. So as we navigate through the exhibition, what we're going to do is look at some of the images, but we also have some video on tap for you. And so we're going to share some of the video. So when you do, if you are able to make it in person, please make sure you listen to some of the video. So it's multisensory. As we walk through, we'll explain some of that. Thank Apex. I also want to thank all the lovely artists that joined us. I want to thank my home institution, Southern Methodist University in Texas, for also supporting me in this project. And I think we're just about ready to begin. Okay. All right. And what you see is a 3D virtual tour that is also online at Apex Art Gallery, but we are going to start here with our first artist, Scherezade, which is this lovely large-scale painting. This is a brand new work that was commissioned for this exhibition. So I'm really happy that Scherezade was able to produce this work. She is a New York and Texas-based artist actually now, and she is working in a kind of Baroque, very painterly aesthetic. So think Diego Velázquez. And the title for this work is An American Landscape, Encounters of Traveling Flora. And I think that kind of really points to the agency of plants and the way we're thinking about plants. And this new body of work, she is thinking also about commodities. There is an extension of this work where she's thinking about cacao, sugarcane, cassava, and other marketable economies, networks of exchange. But the key word in her work is encounters. And she's really kind of privileging the flora here, as well as thinking about water landscapes. I think you can see we have the kind of, lace collar that you see in 17th century Spanish art, Baroque art, very painterly. And she's thinking about the relationship between the Americas, European encounters, and how this really impacted the environment, the landscape. I don't think we really think about how much the American landscape, when I say American, I don't just mean US, I mean Americas, North America, South America, Caribbean. So please know I'm thinking hemispherically here, how much of the landscape really was impacted and altered and changed, and not for the best in terms of being able to support these monocultures that ended up in the Americas. So you can kind of see her working with this idea of encounters and traveling flora here. Okay, next piece. All right, and we are looking at 4 works by the same artist. This is Tamika Galanis. On the left, we have her video, Catching Shadow. And then on what we're looking straight ahead are 3 photos from the I Name Charlotte series. I want to go to the video first, and I'll say a little bit about the video and then we'll play a little bit of it. Just to let you know a little bit about Tamika. She is from the Bahamas. She does a lot of archival research into working on these artistic projects. And Catching Shadow, that's the name of this video. I also have to say that the artist Charlotte Hanay is responsible for the prose and the voiceover for this video. So it was a collaboration. And Catching Shadow is a term that describes either releasing or binding a spirit in a silk cottonwood tree, which is sometimes called a duppy or a duppy tree or a ghost tree. And so she walks us through this kind of process of ritual of offering luscious fruits to the duppy tree, but then also the central figure you can see floating here. It may not be clear, but she's floating in crystal clear blue water, and it's an aerial shot. So as you walk through, as you get a chance to look at the video, you kind of get to see this journey of a kind of ancestral memory and connection, but then also this journey of a binding and a release of the self. So let's just play a little bit of the video and you can see what I'm talking about.
Want to add anything and take anything away. We are all accountable to gods and to each other. Every symbolic move has meaning. This is a practice of reciprocity. You are not broken. You are mine. I have claimed you across incarnations and multiverses. Be home in this body, this moment, this life. Even without child, was long gone from me. Just go back. What did we become? Pretty.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I just realized in the close-up shot of that, the fruit that was at the far right, I think that was soursop. And yesterday we had a workshop also in conjunction with the show called Potions, From Poisons to Panaceas, The Secret Life of Botanicals. And one of the fruits that she goes over in the video is, in the workshop was soursop. So now I only want soursop. But anyway, so that's a little bit of the Catching Shadow video. Let's take a look at the photographs. On the left, can everybody see it's a central figure, but wrapped in the castor. So with this particular series, the I Named Charlotte series, Tamika Galanis conducted a lot of archival research in one of the ruins of the one of the slave plantations there in the Bahamas. And what she discovered was how important and central the castor plant was. And so this is actually a live figure wrapped in the castor plant. And then you have the figure in the center with the shells, covering the face like a mask. And then also set in the ruins of the slave plantation, the final figure is also wrapped in the castor plant, and it's just beautifully lit with the sun. And so what Tamika discovered was that the castor plant can be very healing, can be very nurturing for the skin, and a remedy and a salve, but also the castor plant can be a poison when prepared a certain way. And what she found in her research was that the enslaved people here in the plantation actually utilized the poisonous castor plant, the poisonous properties of the castor plant to poison their masters. So there is a whole history here of, a colonial history here that is literally wrapped up in one plant. And Corina is going to introduce a couple of timelines that have to do with this series and also the next works we're going to show you.
Yeah, thank you. So the next work is actually a collaborative one that was produced by a trio of artists and to which I contributed with my research. So the work is by Agate Tuna, Anna Malicka, and Kristaps Ancāns. It's called Botanical Timeline, and it has 4 sections, and I will speak about each one. Each section is focusing on one plant that you can also find throughout the exhibition in the artist's works. And with this, we kind of wanted to tease out a little bit more this kind of different entanglements of key plants in colonial history, and to kind of really highlight the kind of very rich history of these plants, as they have been used as both poisons and medicine. And the first 2 ones that I will speak about are the castor plant, which also Tashima alluded to in Tamika's work. And also I would also want to highlight that you're meant to look at these works sitting down on these gray mattresses, which reproduce the ceiling of Apex Art of the gallery, which also has this kind of very beautiful botanical motifs We really loved this, this ceiling during our research trip, and we kind of wanted to find a way to kind of integrate it in the show. And when I was speaking to Kristaps, one of the artists, about my research and kind of about the show, we were thinking about, how to kind of transpose the visitor and in this kind of more immersive way to view these timelines. And we came up with this idea that you should be laying down, because when we are ill, also when we are recovering, we are usually sitting in a bed, we are usually laying down somewhere. And also from my readings for my previous exhibitions, I came across examples of indigenous people on the island of Java in Indonesia who were protesting the Dutch colonial rule by also laying down and refusing to perform labor and to cut down trees and so on. So it felt kind of like an appropriate way to kind of integrate it into the timeline. And also the actual kind of material for the timeline is actually an animation that was filmed in Latvia at the institution, one of the institutions where I currently work, the Art Academy of Latvia, and the post program. And Anna and Agate, used the archival images that I pulled in connection with each plant, and then they transposed these onto textiles, and also with the help of bleach, and created these kind of very unique patterns, mixing together the historical figures associated with the plant itself, other kind of important documents in history associated with it. And also over this animation, we decided to kind of narrate our own stories about these plants. They are written in kind of very poetic tone, and again, they are kind of mixing together different from perspective. So for example, the castor plant, we are looking at what the plant itself may be thinking or feeling or sensing, together with, what people have been poisoned by this plant, with what people who are, harvesting it, picking it, and so on. And now I will ask Ryan to play a bit of the video, and then I will speak a bit more about it.
Pink, orange, and swollen. A burning summer is coming behind you. You look like an illusion. Smoke and ashes from wildfires. Add more color to your face. Burn bright, help us grow. Taller, bigger, large leaves like sails in the wind.
We bless you, Lady, for now and forever and for eternity. Lady, have mercy on us. Your mercy is great. Help us to work well in the woodlands today. Now cross yourself and say, Great Mary Magdalene, help me. You know by your own life how a sinful soul can be reconciled with its Creator. What counsel a soul in misery needs. What medicine will restore the sick to health.
Oh prophets, today is a bad
Thank you so
day.
much.
Yesterday we collected more.
Yeah,
Were
so-
you here with us too? Everyone.
So you can view the whole video on the website, but the idea behind these animations that we would find a form that would fit kind of the history and the content. And for this one, we thought of the form of a prayer, as the castor oil has also been used to create anointment oil. And also the images that you see are some from ancient Egypt, where the castor oil was used to, make the hair shinier and grow stronger, and also for skin. But also we are talking about, people like dissidents during the Cold War who were poisoned by darts by the KGB for escaping and criticizing the regime. And also examples, for example, from the times of Mussolini, when dissenters to his regime were punished by being tortured with castor, forced to ingest the castor seeds, which are very lethal. And the next plant that I will talk about that relates to the show is the manchineel plant, which I discovered is one of the most dangerous and most lethal plants in the plant kingdom. And, just sitting underneath a manchineel tree can make you be sick. And it's found, in the Caribbean. And there's many stories about, just tourists stumbling and just seeing it as this kind of beautiful, tasty looking apple tree, and then getting very sick or dying because of it. And this was very important plant for us, and I will let Tashima speak about one of the artist's works who's dealing directly with this. But basically, I think one of the most famous stories associated with this plant is that it was famously used to slay one of the conquistadors, Ponce de Leon, who is, very well known for having kind of waged these wars of conquest and having, captured the land that is now Florida in the United States. For this plant, we imagined, because it's so dark and it's so lethal, it almost doesn't have any pollinators, because it kind of kills everything that comes close to it, except for the tortoise and black lizard. That it should be said as a horror story and so narrated from the perspective of a man who is kind of going to become this general. So it's kind of this very kind of intense dark story around this plant, and how the plant itself requires almost like human blood to kind of sustain itself. So we can play a little bit of this one as well.
Said the father to his boy, "I think someday you will make your natural tendencies pay. You will be a warrior. You have a talent for causing things pain. Be a general. People will pay you to be inhuman. Your temperament is wrong for priesthood. Farming would suit still less. Here is now the leader of the strong men, sucking up lands far away." Meanwhile, on Caribbean shores, there were plenty wild fruits of many kinds, which some men not very prudently tasted. On only touching them with their tongues, mouths and cheeks swell, and each suffered such great heat and pain. And they suddenly encountered a deadly threat to their very existence, and this terrifying enemy surfaced as such enemies often do, in the seemingly most innocent and likely places, sweetly lying on the beach many moons ago. Roots began to form, but not enough.
You can see it's quite one of the most intense of the videos. I'll let Tashima now speak about the work of an artist who uses the manchineel plant and weaves it into her artwork as well.
Yes, thank you, Corina. Looking at those videos again, that last one in particular is so film noir. I mean, it's so cinematic and so imaginative. I hate that we have to cut it short because I want to hear the whole thing all over again. It's kind of creepy, but it tells, such a wonderful history. And I just want to emphasize that the two timelines that Corina just introduced, these are brand new works that were created for this show. And so, you get a chance to see artists' new work. Now we're looking at the work of Joiri Minaya. And on the left, we'll look at the left piece first. If we can get a little bit close up, I kind of want people to see this lovely pattern that is on the wall. On the left, you have a crisscrossing of two plants. Can everybody see? You have the aloe vera, which you probably readily recognize, and then the variegated plant behind it, that is the sansevieria. And what she has done is she paints these plants first, and then she prints them either in a vinyl, or she'll print them as fabric, as we will see, to cover different statues often related to colonialism. And so then what we are looking at is a kind of crisscrossing of the aloe vera and sansevieria. What she's done is kind of replicated in the botanical form, the crisscrossing of two machetes. So oftentimes you'll see symbolically reproduce a crisscrossing of two machetes that often represents revolution or colonial resistance. And sometimes you'll see these symbols above the threshold of a house as you walk through the door, as a way to kind of protect the house. So there is a certain kind of ritualistic and symbolic aspect here with this kind of presentation. And so in this particular case, what we're looking at is two images from a photographic series where she printed out the aloe vera and the sansevieria plants in fabric and covered them, covered a Columbus statue. So we're talking about Christopher Columbus here being shrouded in this kind of botanical print. And then thinking about how much of our histories have been shrouded, have been cloaked in mystery. And that's the name of this series, the Cloaking series. And it distorts the a kind of, you know, formal reading of the statue. You don't get to see the statue. What you see is this kind of, you know, botanical, natural reclaiming of the environment in a way where nature's almost reclaiming itself, and you don't see Columbus anymore. You see the botanical basically as a kind of agent of resistance. And on the right, you have something very similar. As Corina already described, what we're looking at is this really lovely, almost 19th century design of a manchineel plant. And you might think that this is a kind of, you know, early 20th century decorative art design that she found somewhere. No, these are images that she creates herself. But they're so lovely in terms of their design and decorativeness that they almost kind of, you know, throw you off a little bit. We're looking at something that's very poisonous here, and that's the manchineel. And so she's taken the manchineel, printed this also on fabric, and has covered the Juan Ponce de Leon statue here. And that's what we're looking at is from this photographic series. Now, I do want to say sometimes she does receive permission to do this kind of work, and then there are other times where she might find a statue she's not given permission, and it's kind of guerrilla style. She goes out there with the prints and covers the with the fabric and covers these statues, photographs them, and then, you know, kind of moves on. And so we're really left with interpreting history. Almost you're forced to interpret it almost through the lens of the environment here. And speaking of the environment and interpretation, we have Kristaps' work next that Corina's going to introduce.
Yeah, so I'd like to speak a bit about Kristaps' practice. Yeah, first I want to say that we worked together previously on the project for the Venice Biennale, and we worked together very closely on how to present the research that was for that project. And also his practice usually involves working with kinetic works, but also he is an artist that is very kind of like context driven and uses the context as a medium in itself. And for this piece, this is a theme that Kristaps has been kind of working on, but I think it kind of grew out of, you know, our different conversations about my writing and this exhibition. And it consists of these two videos, which feature mainly, it's a kind of layering of different videos. So there's videos that he shot in the UK of birch trees, which is a tree that's kind of indigenous to Eurasia and kind of very, very popular in Latvia, where the artist is based right now. And together with these shots of domestic interiors, which are covered kind of to a very kind of luxurious degree with these exotic prints from wallpapers to pillows to carpets. And then you have these flowers that we normally tend to buy from IKEA, which are also kind of clone specimens of plants that some of them once grew in indigenous context, but now there's kind of no connection between the environment where they once grew and maybe some in those environments they are now extinct. And kind of mass reproduction of flowers that we buy at IKEA and that we love to decorate our domestic interiors with. And some of these wallpapers and all this kind of decorations for the home fetch like exorbitant prices. And they kind of become a status symbol. So within these kind of very lush interiors, he has built two kinetic works, which he meant to show only in the form of these videos. And they're both works that kind of propose these absurd tasks. One of them is called Your Butterfly, and the other one is called a machine that can complement two butterflies at the same time. So this kind of absurd task is kind of reveals this kind of violence, because even through the act of petting or scolding or doing anything, the butterfly would perish or be kind of severely injured. And I read this work as kind of this larger metaphor that these environments that we create for ourselves in our own homes, which kind of these symbols or kind of hearken to these indigenous contexts that we may never visit or are totally unknown, or that present plants that would normally not grow together. So these environments become very kind of inhospitable and kind of are unable to sustain life itself and kind of become very alien to us. And the installation is called Instructions on How to Learn New Synonyms Every Day. And it's presented in this kind of way of kind of trying to kind of suggest this domestic interiors and kind of these TV sets that you normally would place in your living room, and together with this really kind of lovely addition that I really enjoy of these two elephants, which are watering cans, that again kind of reference these these colonial contexts that are now kind of like in a way domesticated and translated through the colonial imaginary, and which we consume in our homes. And I would like please play one of the videos so we can see the machine working and this kind of close-ups of the interior. And the sound that you hear is the sound of the trees going through these birch trees. Thank you. So in connection to this, right next to this, also a new commission from Kristaps are two other chapters from the botanical timeline that we'll go to in a minute. One is dedicated to the castor plant, which is visible and featured in one of the wallpapers that Kristaps shot in this flat in London in the UK. And the castor plant has also this kind of very rich history which, yeah, I was really fascinated to look at the different kind of overlapping cultural myths and kind of different types of knowledges associated with each plant. And for the coral tree, I was especially kind of struck by, well, first of all, that it's, Latin given name, which it was, renamed when it was brought to Europe, is actually a racial slur. And this is still not very well known fact. And people today still refer to this and still put kind of messages that this is this plant, not knowing that they are kind of perpetuating this kind of injuries, historical injuries, that renaming this plant has caused. But also what I also came across the myth of coral tree in Argentina, where there is the kind of national story of a woman who was enslaved by conquistadors, and she escaped. But she was captured, unfortunately, in the forest. But before she could, and she was killed by being burnt alive, unfortunately. But before her captors could take her body away, when they came back for it, they saw this resplendent coral tree growing instead of the woman's body. So in the kind of national imaginary, this tree is kind of symbolic of this strength and courage that one has before this kind of invading forces. And so for this narration, yeah, I focused especially on this story, and again the animation that Anna and Agate put together brings these historical images together with our own kind of retelling of the story. And let's play just a few seconds from it.
There was a man centuries ago who loved to sing about nature. Conquistadors invaded his land. He was enslaved, but he escaped, killing his captor in the process. Unchained, he fled into the deep forest. Fleeing did not help his plight. He was swiftly recaptured. He continued to sing about his land. For his disobedience he was punished, burned alive. He continued to sing as he burned. Then the captors returned. They could not find his body anymore. There was a beautiful bright coral tree. The tree grew on the spot where...
Thank you. Yeah, and as you can see in the animation, we focus not only on the plants and the different kind of historical figures, but also we took a closer look at what insects these plants are attracting, and who is pollinating them, or what kind of animals are associated with it, who can either kind of the toxin of the plant, or kind of are living as parasites around the plant. So all of this kind of is incorporated in the visual messages. And finally, the last plant in the timeline is the peacock plant. And this is very significant plant for us in the exhibition, and we kind of wanted to end the show with it. And I will also kind of let Tashima speak a bit more about the artist, another artist in the show who is using this plant. But it's the peacock plant is very significant because it was used as a way to create this special kind of formula to induce abortions for women, and especially enslaved women used it as a way of not giving birth to children that were conceived by rape, or just not wanting to bring into the world a child that would become a slave. And this knowledge was kind of very well known, but when Europeans found out about it through local sources, they decided that this knowledge was kind of too threatening to transmit back to audiences in Europe. So when the first kind of botanical, books were printed and they had this flower in it, they did not mention about its actual properties at all. Rather, they just mentioned that it's a beautiful decorative plant. And there were a few that wrote about this, but locally, and it was kind of all known by the indigenous people. However, this knowledge was sort of lost in the records of time. So I looked at different types of all kind of elided this information in their publication, but while knowing full well what the plant does. Important to highlight in the context of today, where women's reproductive rights are under threat in the US, but also elsewhere. And I think it sends kind of a very powerful message that this kind of struggle over our bodies and our rights is still ongoing. So let's play a bit of the final video from the timeline. Shut up, red bird of paradise, sing no more, because her heart is in pain. For when freedom was to be had, they used to like you, hear you sing, red bird. The peacock flower keeps asking her, why is she as not red as it is? Why is she not as fiery as it is? Why wouldn't the flower be red and fiery, when it only grows in the tropics? For it only grows in the tropics. And the holy moon keeps asking her, it keeps asking, the holy moon keeps asking her, it keeps asking, where did the cheerfulness go? It keeps asking her. The place is getting muddy because an old bird is crying. And it's not crying because it is old, but it cries for she once had 2 rows of babies, and now they don't belong to her. The dry forest is getting yellow because of the plows. The young woman is turning yellow because of her thoughts, and the bloom turns yellow because of the wind, while the young woman, because of thoughts of despair, sounds of the earth being turned over with a plow, but Thank you. So now I'll let Tashima speak more about Virginia's work that also deals with this plant and its significance.
Okay, thank you. You know, Corina, I want to go back to something that you said a minute ago, and that is the research that you and Anna and Agate did with the peacock flower, coral tree, but also thinking about what kinds of insects, what kinds of other flora and fauna, how they actually work together, and which insects might be, attracted to which flowers. And I just want to point that out, that when you look at 18th and 19th century landscape paintings of the Americas, it's very imaginative. Like, they would put different orchids with birds that didn't even pollinate those flowers, or insects that had nothing to do with this flower in this place or this tree in this place. And it was just kind of a collage of different flora and fauna that actually didn't work together in nature the way they presented it. So they created this kind of imaginary collage of what they wanted everyone else to think the Americas was. I mean, even when you think about, the paintings of different kinds of slave plantations, everybody's at peace, everybody's happy, everybody's working, toiling in these kinds of, Edenic landscapes under palm trees. That is not, of course, we know, what was really going on. And so I really appreciate the research that actually went into this show, and the animations and the timelines in particular. So I just want to say that, because it wasn't always like that.
Yeah. No, and
Yeah.
I remember we were talking about this when I did the research on the orchids. You showed me paintings where they were putting hummingbirds together with orchids. Those things don't go together at all, but they look beautiful in paintings. And so kind of there was like a demand for this type of painting in Europe, of course, and people were buying this, and it was kind of this
Yes.
impossible representation that would not happen in nature. Yeah, actually.
Exactly, exactly. And so the final artist that we're going to look at today is Virginia Wagner's work. And everything you see on the wall here is actually from Virginia. So we have these two medallion paintings that are portraits, and then we have smaller medallion paintings on the wall and layered over this lovely painting of the peacock flower in situ. It took Virginia several days to sketch out this painting. She is very experienced as a scientific illustrator. Her father is a scientist. Both her parents are scientists, but she actually does a lot of the scientific entomological illustrations for her father's work. And so she is really very precise in thinking along the lines of a scientific illustrator, which is what Maria Sylvia Marian is. If we could do a close-up on her portrait on the left. Can everybody see this? So this is a portrait of Maria Sylvia Marian. She's a German-born Swiss scientific illustrator and naturalist from the 17th century. And so I also want to just mention how remarkable it was to have a woman who was a scientific illustrator, naturalist, actually come to the Americas. I mean, we know about, Alexander Humboldt and, all of these others, but we don't see too many women involved during this time. And here we have Maria as an example. So Virginia was conducting a lot of research on this particular scientific illustrator. And again, this is brand new work that she created for the show. And she does this kind of, beautiful, luscious ink spill portrait of Maria that, we get some indication of a figure here, but the figure is also wrapped up in nature. We see butterflies, we see the snake, we see her examining under glass more closely the peacock flower. And it's kind of a portrait that you see that it's like almost it's still in process here. And the peacock flower, as Corina already explained, was used as an abortifacient quite often by indigenous women and African enslaved women. I just also want to add that, there are several reasons to want to utilize the power of the peacock flower, but also these women suffered a lot in childbirth. The mortality rate of children often was over 50%, and in some places 50 to 80% died. And so there are lots of reasons why, they really utilize the power of this peacock flower. And you can see, the dribbles and these kinds of painterly drips that, oh, thank you so much for this close-up. You can see these drips of the peacock flower. We know this is paint, wet paint dripping down the flower, from the flower, but I often think about it almost kind of as like a bloody residue, almost in a way, as something kind of very visceral and very bodily. There's a fluid here, that kind of connects to a very bodily shape and form. There is a connection here. And again, the smaller portraits, peacock flower and another flower. I asked the name of this. I forgot temporarily what that one is. And then that is a morpho butterfly up top. And then on the right, you can see us swinging around to a portrait of an indigenous woman. Well, the scientific illustrator, Maria, she comes to Suriname. Okay, she's doing all of this research, where is she getting this knowledge from of how the plants function and operate, where they grow, how they use them? She was getting a lot of her knowledge from an indigenous woman in particular. Now, there are no, she mentions that in her research, in her archives, Maria mentions that the indigenous woman is who she relied upon. She doesn't give her a name. She doesn't say who she was. She doesn't really, we don't have any kind of idea of what she looked like, exactly where she was from, how old she was, or anything. And so what Virginia did was she found a woman in this particular area near where Maria was working. And she worked with this woman to create a portrait of her. So we're actually looking at a portrait of a living woman today that was basically her model for this indigenous woman who was unnamed in Maria's work. And then you can see her holding a flower. She's got this curious little salamander that is kind of creeping across her forehead. He is lovely. I mean, the exquisite kind of, precision and color. I can't say enough about these pieces. And like you saw in the timeline video for the peacock flower, you saw the spiders and the spider webs and that kind of animated, it looked like a tarantula or something. And then you can see the spider web here, again, butterflies, bees, insects. If you really look at thank you so much. If you look at these kind of close up, you just get rewarded for looking, because you find all of these luscious little, thank you. Can everybody see that salamander kind of creeping along her forehead there? And it looks like he belongs there. He's not invading some other space. There's a relationship that is going on here. And it's really, really exquisite. I think that's all I wanted to say about these. Corina, anything else you want to add to?
Yeah, no, we didn't coordinate on the spider webs or anything. It just happened organically that,
Wow!
yeah, no, there's no when I was sharing the research images with Agatha and Anna, like they picked out from the kind of, host of insects and birds and, lizards and so on, which which actually belonged with one plant, which ones to include in the animation. So it's kind of like a kind of happy overlap between the two works. And yeah, no, I would just want to say I'm really super excited. As Tashima mentioned, a lot of these works are visually striking, but there's a lot of research actually that goes on behind them that the artists put together, that we also looked at. And for me, it's kind of really rewarding to see this all come together and to kind of, also to highlight the contemporary relevance of these stories, because we are still living with the legacy of coloniality and the colonial empires. Maybe the empires themselves geographically don't exist as such. But the structures that were built and the kind of the knowledge systems and the building blocks of classifying and describing nature around us are really kind of go back to that time. And as now there's a lot of increasing relationship with the environment, the climate breakdown that we're living through. It's important to kind of also look back and also go through this process of kind of decolonizing these knowledges and this kind of things that we take for granted, but actually, deep, long, rich, sometimes painful and traumatic history associated with that we're still kind of living through with these consequences today. So yeah, for me, this is one of the messages that I wanted to transmit with this show.
Very good. Very good. If I could say one more thing about the peacock flower, can we get a little bit of close up on some of the leaves that are unfinished? because as somebody might think, oh, wait a minute, she forgot to finish painting this whole thing. You can see some of it is painted, some of it is, you can still see the draftsmanship there, and it's unpainted. Thank you. Yeah, lovely, lovely shot of that. This is on purpose. We want you to know that this is on purpose. And, you know, just like Corina was saying, you know, a lot of this is still in process. We're living with, you know, through the legacies of these kinds of things. And so, you know, one of the ways I think about this peacock flower that looks like it might be unfinished, but is I see it more kind of still in process. But I also kind of look at the unfinished, so-called unfinished leaves as kind of like a skeletal remain, even though it's, you know, it's not, you know, bone matter. There's something kind of ghostly about it, which also kind of speaks to other things that are in the show that kind of have a ghostly and haunting kind of, you know, aesthetic about it. So there is something very haunting here, but then also something very present here in terms of, you know, terra firma. Yes, lovely. Wonderful.
I think that's very nicely said. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe now we have you know, the opportunity to engage with everybody who's watching, and yeah, if you have any questions for us or comments about the show, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Corina and Tashima, for walking us through that exhibition. It really and truly did feel like a reclaiming, like a reclaiming of history. And I feel like I learned so much more from the works, from what you were able to share and about the research you had done. And as you said, we are open in the chat for any questions that anyone participating may have. And so we have a question from Charmin, and excuse me if I mispronounce your name. And they ask, do you have any comments about the flowers around Barack Obama's portrait? And I suppose that is his presidential portrait.
Yeah. I would have to look at it again. I'm just going off the top of my head. I think it's the Kehinde Wiley one.
Yes.
You know,
Yes, yeah.
the Kehinde Wiley portrait. Everybody knows that, you know, Kehinde Wiley's also, you know, drawing upon art history largely. You know, Corina and I both, you know, have advanced degrees in art history. So we're very familiar with this idea of drawing upon kind of art historical, again, very Baroque. I would say it's, but he takes it to another place that's almost kind of neo-Baroque. I think overall in Kehinde Wiley's work, there is a kind of softening of the masculinity that he's really addressing, just overall in his oeuvre. He's really thinking about a kind of, you know, I guess, you know, a kind of alternate version of a toxic masculinity in a way. He's working against the grain of the macho. And so I think in his way, he's incorporates a lot of kind of floral, Baroque, highly decorative backgrounds in a way to kind of nurture and nourish this idea of a more softened kind of alternative anti-macho masculinity.
Yeah, I looked, I haven't seen this myself in person, but you know, because I'm an art historian, I was very curious, and I'm looking at flowers. But I know the artist included different flowers that speak to Obama's heritage, like his Kenyan roots. He's also the time he spent in Indonesia, his birthplace of Hawaii, and also Chicago, you know, obviously, where he spent a lot of time. And there's different flowers. I think it's lilies, chrysanthemums, and I want to say jasmine or something like this, embedded in this kind of village. And all each of these kind of brings together these different lineages from Obama's life and kind of his significance as a president. And I think, yeah, I've seen a lot of the artist's work. Yeah, I think he's shown all over the world. Most recently, I saw his work in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and I'm always kind of, you know, thinking about, yeah, this kind of Victorian also traditions of representing flowers and like William Morris and things like this, but he makes it so, present and fresh, and then kind of focusing on this kind of significant figures in, African American history in the US that are shown in this classical poses that kind of suggest this kind of majesty. Yeah, but it's a painting that I'd love to see in real life that I haven't yet. Yeah.
Also, if I can just add on a macro level, this probably has nothing to do with the Wiley portrait, but I do want to say that the Obama administration really it took time to create vegetable gardens on the property. And Michelle Obama actually brought in beehives. So she actually, tended to this gardening. I think it was all part of a campaign, Eat Right, Get Up and Move, especially for, young people. But there was also a literal connection with gardening and plants and flowers and beekeeping on site, at the White House, which, we rarely get to see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, and just last thing, that it's kind of this, I know this very kind of lush and kind of living garden in the Obama portrait. So it's not this kind of wallpaper flat, plants that we see, in some of the videos and works in our show, but it's kind of this, really the nature is coming to kind of, yeah, almost competing with the portrait and kind of like envelops him, very actively. So it's kind of very living, yeah, nature around him. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost a double portrait, no, because of
Yeah.
the
The flowers
presence,
and
yeah, of the
yeah.
flowers. Yeah.
I think in that same realm, I wanted to ask if you could speak more to the contemporary importance of the show you've both curated, because in speaking of the peacock plant in Virginia's piece, I had the opportunity to speak to her about the way that the plant does seem as if it could continue to expand and grow and fill up the space. And you talk about the way that these historical things resonate presently. And yeah, I just wanted to know if you could speak more to the contemporary importance of the research you've done and why you've chosen this particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think the show could just be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a lot of stuff that we had to leave out, because of the moment that we are in. And I just want to talk a little bit about the eco-critical, and the contemporary botanical art and the legacy of monocultures and the plantation system. We saw the ruins of the plantation in Tamika's work, Scherezade is addressing it. A lot of the artists are kind of picking up on this. And what that ended up doing was the plantation systems actually redirected our waterways, poisoned waterways, and it introduced a lot of non-native plants and flowers to places that, that had specific reactions where they were. And so as a result of this kind of, legacy of the plantation system, you have loss of wildlife, loss of plant life, loss of human life. Again, you have a real destructive fallout. And again, thinking about all the pesticides that eventually would become, in use in terms of a monoculture, as opposed to thinking about planting different plants and botanicals together, because of capitalism, in particular racial capitalism. It just favored the monoculture system, so that it really destroyed the environment. So we're still living and moving through these kinds of eco-critical, passageways, and what are the results of that? So the artists are picking up on that. I think in many ways the show could be expanded to include even more things. I mean, we tailored it, as much as we could, but as you can tell, just in some of the discussion points, you can see that it could grow. Corina, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, now I've been dealing with this topic around the climate breakdown, and it's kind of very clear that, the kind of people most affected by it are the people living in this kind of former colonies, in the global south, in Latin America, while the biggest producers of these polluters and corporations are, in the wealthiest countries in the world, including the US. And you can, nettle it down to a few corporations, like I think it's around 70 corporations that are producing the catastrophe that we are dealing with today. So it's kind of, we particularly wanted to focus on this context and artists that are coming from these environments and contexts that are most affected also by climate change, and kind of to say that, yeah, this coloniality, we don't call it coloniality, we call, now there's kind of corporations who are doing kind of, in a way, similar harm to what was being done then. And yeah, I think this research we plan to kind of develop in the book much further, and there's many more case studies. But there's cities that are sinking in Southeast Asia as a result of kind of measures that were introduced to segregate the indigenous population from the kind of white European colonial powers, that can be traced back to the 16th century and so on. So it's very, it's very, very kind of, clear if you look at the history. And I'm very passionate about history, and kind of like sharing this knowledge is as a form of resistance, and kind of reminding ourselves, why we are in the situation that we are. And I think it's important, when I was really shocked, for example, with this coral tree, to discover that, the name that people use for it today is kind of this racial epithet used for African communities. And you're encouraged to plant these trees, and things like this, but we're still calling them by a name that causes extreme pain and injuries to other communities. So yeah, it's kind of a constant learning process. And I think, this engagement with history is very kind of essential. And it's not only about the past, it's very much about our present and how we want our future to be.
Exactly. And before we go to the next question, I just want to add that we're all touched by these things. We might be talking about castor plants or peacock flowers or things like that, but what about coffee? What about bananas? And these are crops that are really struggling today. And we're all touched by that, because then you end up, because the coffee plants are really suffering, again, monocultures. And then the banana plants are also are suffering, because they've been, they're propagated asexually, but they've been propagated so much as a monoculture that they are becoming resistant to a lot of the insecticides, and they're being attacked by sigatoka, of fungi and things that are destroying them. So what we're going to start to see in the marketplace are not the regular kind of bananas that we normally see, but more like different, like a smaller banana, a red banana, different kinds of bananas. So our marketplace, our lives are touched by all of these things in some kind of one way or another. And I think, Corina, you pointed that out in such a fascinating way with the castor plant and the KGB and how it was used by Mussolini. And that's a modern part of the history that I didn't know about, before working on this show with you. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I think in that regard, I would like to thank you both for sharing this information and knowledge, especially in a community space, because we speak about how far removed we are from this generational knowledge, but also how important it is and how interconnected everything is. And I thought it was interesting, as you went through the pieces, to think about how powerful the knowledge of the land and the crops and the insects was to the people who lived there, who were enslaved by people who, in a sense, stole that power from them. Like that was the power, the knowledge that they had, the knowledge that they had stripped away from them or removed from them, that was their power. Yes, I thought that was really interesting. And to speak about, again, to how important it is now and how impacted we are now, the importance of these community spaces in which we can share this knowledge with one another and learn, because we are impacted. So thank you. And Sabine asks, can you talk about how the process of applying for the exhibition was like for you, considering how different it is from other application opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very easy and very straightforward. I mean, as we mentioned, the idea of the exhibition came from our book project and from both our previous interests. So in a way, I'm really happy it got chosen, because it's something we were been thinking about for a very long time, like literally years. And yeah, it was kind of very interesting for me, and kind of in a way liberating that you get selected on the strength of the exhibition concept, and also that we had this kind of wonderful team to support us, even though I think the original concept was a bit more broad, and then we kind of really narrowed it down as we were selecting the works and thinking about kind of what specific angle about plants and botany we wanted to pursue. But yeah, I found it kind of very, very straightforward and kind of easy to navigate. Yeah.
Thank you. And I would just again like to redirect and open to our participants if anyone else has any questions. I think you had beautifully explained the pieces, and I feel like I've gained so much clarity on, I've learned so much from what you've shared, both you, Tashima, and Corina. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for moderating and introducing us. And yeah, again, we're very excited about the exhibition, and there's still time for folks if you want to see it in person until December 23rd. And also pick up a copy of the brochure and our longer essay. Yeah, and we're very happy that these kind of resources will be available online as well for anybody who is interested, who may not be able to travel to New York. Yeah.
And thank you so much also for navigating us through the technical side and walking us through the show, and being able to share some of the animation and the lovely sound and the wonderful poesies that is going on in this space. Thank you so much for that. It really helps enhance the experience.
I agree. We have a wonderful team at Apex Art. I'm impressed every day. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And as you said, I do hope everyone comes into the space in Apex Art to see it in person, because that is a large part of the experience as well. The beds are absolutely comfortable. Speaks to immersing in the experience. Truly it does. And I didn't think of it. I was asking myself, why are the mattresses on the floor? And then as you explain, well, recovery, and people often are laying down and recline when they're recovering. It does make a lot of sense to hear it from your perspective, honestly. So thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
We'll keep an eye out for the book as well.
Yes, too.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much for joining us.